Time to take this submarine back up.
But it's tax season up there, Captain.
You know, all that stressing over taxes isn't necessary with Tax Act.
How did you get...
April here to remind you that with Tax Act, you're guaranteed your maximum refund while filing for less.
Beats being submerged for another month. Hey, Captain?
To your stations. We're headed home.
Guess I should probably close that window I opened.
What?
Kidding.
Tax Act.
Switch to Tax Act today and start for free.
See taxact.com for details.
Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto.
In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's like 4 goals, and that's more than 3. It's basic math.
Forced Metaphors, presented by Progressive. Bundle and protect today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Season 3 continues, guys. We are What's Up Doc, the true crime documentary podcast. As always, I am your host, Gemma Delaney. How you doing, guys? We're back to tell you all about the best and biggest and newest and hottest true crime documentaries. As always, guys, we are on social media. If you'd like to give us a follow, I'm feckin' hysterical. It's at What's Up Doc Podcast. That's on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter as well. So today we have Give Us Morgue hosts Niamh and Megan on. How you doing, guys?
Hey, I feel like I'm on a radio show.
Yeah.
The way you introduced us there, I'm like, oh, I'm so famous.
You're through to 108 109 hotline. And then I should have a little sting, a little jingle. 90 or
Please.
108. Yeah, I'll do the deaths then afterwards as well.
RIP.ie.
So guys, I had asked ye to watch Night Stalker, The Hunt for a Serial Killer. And of course, that is Netflix's one about Richard Ramirez and that period of kind of terror and horror in LA back in the 80s when he was, you know, in the middle of his kind of killing spree. So it's on Netflix, like I said. It's 4 parts. And they're about 45-50 minute long each, so very bingeable. And as I said there earlier, I rewatched them all last night. Hour 1. I rewatched it again this morning, so it's very bingeable, isn't it?
It is very bingeable. It's easy to get through, and it's an easy watch as well.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. In terms of
a documentary.
Yeah. It's very entertaining, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It got a bit of stick about that, though. I mean, if you do a quick Google for reviews and stuff, a lot of people saying it kind of was, I don't know, overly glamorizing it, or it was overly stylized. But
we actually talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
Some of the cutscenes, like, you know, where they're reenacting some of the crimes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I did think that they, like, certain lighting and filters and that kind of thing almost made it almost cool, if that makes sense. Like, it almost seemed to make him out to be cooler than what he was. But again, like, if you take it, like, it has to be entertaining as well. So it needs to be nice on the eye. And if you're just watching it for like entertainment value, then it's really well done. But if you're watching it like with your true crime head on and you're looking for certain points of information, those parts are like useless to you.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd actually completely agree with you there, because I even have it written in my notes that I don't think I've ever seen a documentary that focuses so little on the actual killer.
Yeah, that's what we were saying.
But like, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either.
No,
like,
it was a fresh take because you got to see the detective's side of it.
Yeah.
Normally it's all about the killer themselves and like their whole life, where instead we got to have like a nice little switch where it was all about the detectives and how this horrible case affected their lives.
Yeah, yeah. And the victims and their families too. I don't know. It's probably, I can only kind of think of one other documentary where the victims and victims' families have featured so heavily as well. Like there's a fuckload of contributors in this documentary as well, isn't there? Like
yeah, I thought that was brilliant.
Oh my God,
Absolutely
so many
brilliant.
contributors.
It's great to see, like,
and like it's a testament as well, I think, to the director, the producers, and the crew to be able to get them all on board as well. Because like you'd be doing well, you know yourselves, like doing a true crime podcast, you'd be doing well to get one person from a case to talk to you. You'd be on cloud 9 to get one person from a case to talk to you. But to get like that volume of people, and I think, you know, in fairness, that's like I said, a testament to the crew and the producer and all that. This documentary as well, just to go through some of the techie stuff, the technical stuff and the boring stuff. This is Tiller Russell. Have you ever seen any of his stuff before?
No, but I was searching him up before, like today. What was he on? Was it West Side he was on, or was it the other director? West Side that he
Tiller Russell is probably most famous for, I don't know if you've seen it before, but the 7-5. The 7-5 would be kind of like, it was kind of one of Netflix's original true crime document. You know what I mean? It's back there. It was the same period of time with like Making a Murder. So we're going way back to the start of Netflix nearly, you know? So it was one of the originals, and it was actually one of the first titles besides Making a Murder and like House of Cards that I ever watched on Netflix. And I didn't realize, I went looking then when obviously, you know, I was doing my research for this today's episode. They've fucking taken it off. Netflix have taken the 7-5 off, which is a pity. It's a cracking documentary.
A lot of true crime.
It's about like police corruption in the 75th precinct in the 80s. But it's
no way.
Brilliant. It's so good. It's so good. And then the other one he'd be most famous for would be Operation Odessa. And that's why I was asking you, had you seen any of his stuff before? Because there's definitely, you know, if you knew it was him, you could definitely see similarities in terms of like what you were talking about there, how the scenes were quite stylized and stuff like that. Like that's you know, one of his calling cards nearly. He likes that kind of stylized shot and recreation, and you know, he's good at doing that. So some people hate it, some people love it. I kind of like it, to be honest with you, because it's hard to be different with a true crime documentary as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because at the end of the day, like, it's the same, like, you know, almost the same. Like, even when we're telling a story, you're trying to make it more interesting because it's the same format, if really.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about what happened, like, you know, as in, like, this is who we're talking about, this is what they did, this is what ended up happening to them. So it was actually quite nice and refreshing to have a new spin on it.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you completely. And as well, I think like, particularly with a case like Richard Ramirez, I mean, like, if you don't know about it at this stage, you know, it's around so long. It's not a new story. We know this story. We know the ins and outs of it. So it's very hard. He's nearly like there's such a thing to be drawn on, but it's nearly like Marvel. Like, it's like, how do you do it different? You know, it's been rehashed so many times, and it's like with Richard Ramirez as well. Like, there's been so many shagging films and, like, you know, documentaries or like dramatizations made about it. So it's hard to do it different. But yeah, I think you know, it's a nice little spin that they've taken on it as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of do a little synopsis of the story itself, and get you guys to interject occasionally as well. So like it starts out kind of setting the scene, doesn't it, in terms of like it's doing the backstory on LA, where LA was at the time, and this of course is back in the 1980s, the mid 1980s, and it's kind of the glory days of LA, and it's saying how, like, you know, it was glamour and it was glitz and crime was down, and then suddenly this happens, like, you know, and it just it shook LA, and it shook their sense of safety and all of that kind of thing. And then, like, as you said, it introduces really who is the main character in this, and that is Detective Gil Carrero. And
Yeah.
he's a cracker, isn't he?
Oh, and like what's insane is like doing research for the case. Nowhere, well, obviously he's mentioned along the line, but he's not actually made out to be as important. It's all about Frank Salerno.
Yeah.
And how amazing he was when I was doing research. And like, so watching the documentary, I was like, who's this guy? And then I was like, oh my God, he's amazing. Like, what, like, where was he in my research? Where was he? He was hiding.
Yeah, and of course, like, Frank Salerno was known as the man. Like, he was the big shot detective when it came to like true crime in 1980s America. And yeah, you're dead right, I suppose. So when you Google it or when you do your research on it, he's the one who's going to be more prominently there and more to the forefront. And yet, the director and in the telling of this documentary, they've chosen kind of to focus on his sidekick. Why do you think they did that?
Well, because he did have a more important part to play in catching him. Like, you know, he was smart and he knew what he was talking about when it came to who was committing these crimes. Do you know? And also, it's like everybody knows Frank Salerno almost if you're into true crime and you're, you know.
Yeah, I think Gil has a very important part in the whole documentary in that he was the first one to say, hey, these crimes I think are connected, and everybody kind of beat him down for it. And like, I think, I don't know, he's very, very smart. He's a very, very clever man. And I think that the producers probably, or directors, I don't know what way that works, but they probably wanted to kind of bring that light on him a little bit and just be like, yeah, you know what, actually he was the first one to kind of say, hey, there's something going on here. There's a serial here.
Absolutely. I think as well, and it could be like the cynical kind of producer head on me, but I think as well, Gil is much more likable, isn't he? He's a much more...
He is.
He's,
yes.
You can be warm to him, where Frank is a little bit more standoffish. He has a little bit more of that kind of, you know, typical... you know, if you were watching an episode of Law and Order SVU, Frank Salerno would be literally... like bullet point for bullet point what you would write in a character as a hardened detective, like, whereas Gil is like this.
He even looks like,
that's like he's been around, he's seen everything. Like, you know, he's had his hardships, where Gil is like at the beginning of the series, he's, you know, just this new cop on the scene wanting to solve crime, and you know,
everyone hated him.
Nobody believed him, and he's like, no,
he's like real bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and all, like, oh, crime, and everyone's like, fuck off, like, you know, they have no time for him at all. Sure, they don't, like, you know.
No.
Yeah, I think he's so likable though, and like even the way they introduce him in the documentary, they have him. I don't know if you remember this, but they have him talking about his religion. Like, that's literally the first thing you hear about him, is like, you know, I think the first words he says on screen are like, I believe in the devil, and I believe in hell. Like, I believe in good and evil. I believe in a right and a wrong. I believe there's God looking after us and the devil trying to, like, you know, turn people and twist people. And, you know, his faith is obviously very strong and very important to him. And you get a sense of the type of person that he is straight off the bat. So like, he's not just a detective. When he sees this kind of evil, he believes it's otherworldly. Like, he believes it's a higher power. It's a, you know, a force greater than us. Like, and he really does believe he's doing God's work, you know, that's his role on earth, is that, you know, and whether you believe that or not, like, I'm an atheist, you know, I don't obviously believe, but I think it is very admirable to have those kind of qualities and characteristics and to take your job so seriously. So, you know, from the get-go, you're like, this guy is, you know, a good, you know, the child of immigrants, you know, hardworking, blue-collar guy. And, you know, this is, his job means a lot to him. He's worked his way up from nothing, like, you know, and he kind of talks us through that as well. So, but I just thought it was interesting that they focused on him rather than Frank Salerno, because as he correctly stated, like, you know, if you're into true crime, you'll know that name. He was like the dawn of true crime and solved so many cases back then. Sorry, were you saying something?
He's the true crime godfather.
The true crime godfather. I like it. I like it. But it starts off with like, you know, what they deem to be the first crime. This
Gemma, you're on.
yeah, this Dale Okazaki and Maria Hernandez, and it kind of starts with that as the first murder, and Dale is point blank shot between the eyes, killed instantly. And then Maria Hernandez comes back to the condo and like by some fucking miracle manages to deflect. Do you remember this? She deflects the bullet off.
This is amazing.
The keys in her hand. She had her keys in her hand and put them up to her face, and that deflected the bullet, and she survived.
I literally was like, when I was researching that, I was like, no way. Like, shut the fuck up. Like,
I know.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. That's insanely lucky.
But then
If
for
that
her
happened
to
in a
come
film, you wouldn't believe it. Sure, you wouldn't. You'd say
Yeah,
it was
no,
too
you wouldn't.
far-fetched, like.
Yeah.
But then for her to come face to face with Richard at the front door, like that I would have like dropped. Like, I don't know what kind of animal plays dead. I think they're sloths. I don't know, but I would have dropped. But she, like, fair play to her. She was like, you've already shot me once. Like, why would you shoot me again? Kind of thing. Like, good woman. I would simply pass out, I think.
Hand on heart, think I would pee my pants.
Yeah.
Like,
He
I'm
kind
not,
of stands off with him, like, and amazingly, he strolls away from her and leaves her and doesn't kill her. And then, so they, as I said, you know, in the timeline of this documentary, they start with that. But, like, really, I suppose, if you're researching the case, that wasn't the first.
Sorry.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't the first killing. No, there was a few before them. I think 3. I think 2 or 3 before them. But
Why do you think they left the other ones out then? Why do you think they started at that point?
Well, I'd say probably because, like, you know, you have these first 2 or 3 murders. They probably at the time mean nothing, and then you have this one where, like, you know, the girl is left alive. She survives. So that's an interesting take on it, you know, like an interesting point. And this is probably where they start to really connect that, okay, well, this is extremely similar to the other cases. The other, what am I trying to say?
The murders that
The
have
other
happened
murders.
previously.
Yeah, I don't know why that
What
was
do they call them?
What should we call that crime that happened?
That's the thing we
That
talk about all. I know sometimes you just get like what you call a brain fart though, don't you? And you just, even when you're talking about something the whole time, you're like, what is that word? Crime. That's what it's called. I think as well, I think you're dead on. I think as well, I wonder, I don't know for certain, is this the point in the narrative or the point in the story which, you know, Gil and Frank come on board? You know, maybe they had nothing to do with the previous murders. Because you're dead right. There was 2 or 3 before this that they have since linked, obviously, with Richard Ramirez. The first one being May. I cannot think of her surname. She was like, remember the 9-year-old girl that he raped and killed, and then he hung from the pipe, in the basement of the hotel. And like, that's just one of his most famous murders. So I was kind of surprised that they didn't include it in the narrative at all of the documentary.
At the time of the crimes, they didn't actually have his DNA to link him to that. It was actually later on when he was caught that when they had his DNA that they were able to link him. There was also secondary DNA, which they actually believed to be Richard's uncle.
Yeah.
Is it his uncle?
His uncle.
Yeah. They have DNA that they believe to be the uncle, but they actually can't confirm if it's him.
I
or not.
remember reading about that. Was that like meant to be the same uncle that killed the wife in front of him, or was this different uncle? Same uncle.
Yeah. No, that's the same.
Yeah. Because obviously a lot of people then would, you know, going into the psychology of that was something that was deemed that would have been like a turning point in his life. I think, I could be wrong, but I think Richard Ramirez was only like 13 or 14, was he, when that happened?
He was.
Yeah.
He actually had a really terrible childhood. Like, I'm not saying abuse, but like anything that happens to serial killers, you know, the way there's always something. There's always like, you know, they were abused, or they had a creepy uncle, or they had a creepy, that he had it all.
Yeah, he really did.
He had it all. But yeah, this uncle actually spoke to him all throughout his crime spree, which is never really mentioned either.
Mm.
So, like, I feel like this uncle had a part to play in why he was so
Evil.
Well, yeah, evil.
Definitely.
I was gonna say disturbed.
Yeah. And like, it's just the perfect kind of storm as well, unfortunately, isn't it? You know, you could be that type of person and never meet someone that would kind of encourage that behavior or kind of egg you on. And I'm not saying that the uncle made him do this. I think he was going to do it anyway. He obviously had, you know, bigger demons, but it can be that kind of perfect storm when you have someone in your life that glorifies that kind of behavior and encourages it. Because didn't that uncle as well, didn't he like show him pictures of like women he like raped and decapitated when he was serving in the Vietnam War, and like
beheaded women?
Just an animal. Yeah.
He showed him pictures of women that he'd raped and women that he'd beheaded and attacked, and he actually taught Richard how to like sneak up on women and like be stealthy in murdering, and like this is the things he's teaching a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah. Most uncles teach you how to fucking fish or something, don't they? Like, Christ almighty, like it's just
literally
a bit of an Addams Family situation, God forgive me, but isn't it? It's just, you know, it's not a good situation. And like I said, not making any excuses for him, but there's, you know, there's always a bigger thing behind it, or a reason why they are the way they are. But then after the murder of Dale Okazaki, and like I said, her friend Maria gets away, it's like the next day there's another murder a mile away where this woman is stopped in a car and shot. Remember this? And then they say that the gun is the same caliber as the one used on Dale. And then Maria Hernandez gives a description to a sketch artist, not a very good one. Well, maybe her description was good, or maybe the sketch artist, right? It's hard to know, but Jesus, like some of the, they're not great. They're not some of the what you call them.
So long to catch them.
I don't know how you would. Yeah, and there was like this plethora of memes came out of these sketches as well, didn't they, online, which is terrible, really, because like, I mean, Jesus, it's, you know, obviously they didn't have the technology we have nowadays, like, but Jesus, you'd wonder how they were ever going to get into some of those.
I feel like the sketches are something that I would draw. Like, does this look like?
Likewise. Likewise, yeah. And I, with the exception of one, maybe around the eyes looked like them. The rest of them, like, they could have been any Joe Soap. They were so generic looking. But then Gil is talking about, there's this scene, like what you were saying there earlier, how Gil is the guy who kind of puts two and two together and goes, I think, you know, this is the one guy here. He says that, like, and this is only like 2 days or 3 days into it. He's like, you know, I started instantly seeing that there was this pattern of, like, you know, he wanted to look them in the eyes. He wanted to you know, stalk them, see the fear. Yeah. And he thinks it's like maybe this sexual deviancy, that there's a sexual motive behind it, even though at this point he hasn't actually sexually assaulted those two victims, the two that they think are connected. But he actually instantly thinks it's some kind of a sexually motivated crime. And then a few days later, a week later, there's the brutal murder of the Zazzaros. So again, I don't know if you guys remember, but this was the first that they know of, man and wife attacked together, murdered together.
Yeah, there's a few that really like stick out in my mind from him, and this is one of them.
Yeah.
Because it is so brutal.
It really is. And then, like, I suppose the I want a better word than a good thing to come out of it. Like, the only positive, I suppose, to come out of it is that this is the first shoe print, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
This is where the first shoe print is found. So I'm going to get used to talk. If people haven't seen this, why is the shoe print so synonymous, or why is it so important in this narrative?
Only pair of shoes he seemed to own.
Yeah, so this shoe print is found at so many different scenes, and I actually thought that this was absolutely amazing how they managed to like really hunt down this one particular shoe and find out that there was only one of this shoe in the whole of LA.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was amazing.
Like, for the 80s, let's be real, that's immense work.
Yeah. But for one of the investigators to actually hop on a plane and go to the inventor of the shoe and like look over the soles of the shoe and everything with them, just thought that was like, that's really good work to me.
So it was like in lieu of a fingerprint, they had this shoe print at like 99.9% of the scenes of his crimes. So he wore gloves, so there was never any fingerprints, but they found this shoe print. And like you said, it was...
The only thing better than grinding all night for your side hustle is your roommate picking you up with Mickey D's breakfast. The perfect pickup deal.
There's a deal for every morning at McDonald's.
Right now, taste breakfast perfection when you get a warm and savory sausage McMuffin with egg for just $2.50. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with combo meal.
If you love to be remembered as the person who gives the best birthday gifts, I'm here to tell you that 1-800-Flowers.com is your ultimate birthday gifting destination. 1-800-Flowers has thoughtful and artfully created options that are guaranteed to deliver the best birthday surprise. Shop thousands of unique gifts at 1-800-Flowers.com for exclusive offers and great values. To order today, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in.
Just like some stroke of fucking luck that it was the most rare. It was this brand called Avia. I don't know if they're still in manufacture. I've never heard of them before, never heard of them since. But Avia, and this particular type of shoe, then I think there was only like a couple of thousand made. And then from the survivors' testimonies, they knew that it was a black shoe. So they contacted the shoe company and they were like, oh, we only actually made 5 or 6, I think, pairs of that particular shoe in black. And then when they looked, like you said correctly, through the kind of sales docs, there were, out of the 5 or 6 ever made, 5 of them were sent to Arizona and 1 was sent to LA. So they were like, if we find the shoe, we find him, in effect. Like, so it was, it was a fingerprint, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, that, like, his shoe print was his fingerprint. It was his like, that's how you knew it was him, because if that shoe print was at the scene, it was the Night Stalker. No questions needed to be asked. Like, it was him. Like, that's who we're looking for.
Can we just, on the topic of the shoe print, remember when they found the shoe print in concrete at the building site?
Yeah.
And one detective, literally, just to get the size of the shoe, put his own fucking shoe in the print. I was like, seriously?
I know.
Are you for real?
Oh, God.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? But like, as well, when you start getting into true crime, or you start getting into true crime documentaries, like, you just realize how fucking often that used to happen. And even up until, like, you know, you could go with more, it doesn't have to be things back in the 80s. You go for more modern cases, even the likes of, you know, I've covered it before as well. Madeleine McCann. Like, oh my God, that's not that long ago. And they completely, like, everything you're not meant to do at a crime scene, they did. And then they wondered why everything was contaminated and why they couldn't get the fucking poor dogs that they brought in to get a scent, or, you know, why they were leading them to mad places. And, you know, it's infuriating. But, like, you know, this is 1985 and it's happening, but it's still fucking happening today. So it's, you know, it's not that
I mean, I
it's
feel
not like they're learning from their mistakes. They're still idiots like that who will, yeah, like you said, stick their foot in a fucking shoe print that they need, like as evidence.
But I feel like you can almost forgive it in the 80s because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
But they should know better.
Yeah. And then like by contrast of that, I know we're harping on about the fucking shoe and the shoe print a lot, but like then by contrast to that, you know, there's a part of it where Gil is talking about another scene he comes to. Do you know, I think it's Lorraine Hernandez and her husband, and he's a policeman. Do you remember the scene? And she's asleep on the couch and she wakes up and she just senses something in the house and she calls out her husband's name and he doesn't answer. And then, so she knows someone is there, or she senses that someone is there. And then the husband comes, they do a swoop of the house with his gun, and they find a window that had been painted shut, jammed open. So they knew, like, they've never opened this in however long they've lived there. And this is jammed open. And then they look down on the flower bed and there's the shoe print. And like in that instance, some like little junior deputy or whatever, do you remember that? He got a box and like put it over the shoe print. Like nothing happened. Now we're recording again. So yeah, so there's the murder of the Zazzaros, and then after that, it's probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole of the documentary, I'd say, in all 4 episodes. It's the interview with Anastasia Hronis. I'm probably butchering her name. Apologies, Anastasia, if you're listening. I think it's Hronis or Hronas. And she literally, it starts with like a slow pan of her on the screen. The camera's kind of panning around her, and you just hear a voiceover of her saying, "I was 6." Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was really hard. Like,
she literally gave the best like to be able to sit there and talk about what happened to her
so candidly.
Yeah.
Like, fair play to her.
Yeah. And I mean, she was, that we know of, the youngest victim of the Night Stalker. I mean, she survived, but she was still a victim or survivor, whatever you want to call her. But I'm going to get you to talk us through her story, what happened, her incidents, or her attack by Richard Ramirez.
He took her
literally from her bed, like picked her up, and she says in it that she was like, he reminded me of a family member. So it kind of felt normal. It felt like it was okay to just let it happen and be taken by him. And then he drove her off to some secluded place, and she recalls it, and she's like, you know, there was no light. It was all dark inside, fast food boxes, flies, dirt, just everywhere. And then that's where he starts assaulting her. And it didn't really go into how long it went on for. I don't know how long it went on for, but
as far as I know, he never actually kept any of the children for too long of a period. He basically them and then would let them go.
I think Gemma's frozen.
Yeah,
It seems to be the case, all right.
Can you hear us?
That he didn't hang on to them for too long, like hung on to them for maybe a period of hours, and then he would like drop them off. Why do you think he did that? Why do you think he released them again?
I said this to Megan earlier. I feel like it was in his mind, him making up for the fact that he took them. Like he let her, like he drops her off and tells her, go into that shop and tell them that they need to call 911. like that you've been assaulted, and that you need someone to come pick you up and take care of you. Like, I feel like to him, that's him making amends for the fact that he assaulted a child.
That's an interesting take on it. So you feel like he felt some remorse for the children, maybe, as opposed to the adults.
Yeah. And she does say that as well, is that when he was assaulting her, like, she would look at him and in his eyes, it almost felt to her that he was sorry for doing it, but not sorry because he would just continue doing it.
It's like he felt like he had to do it almost.
Yeah.
It
was an interesting quote from her, actually. I thought that was like showed a level of compassion on her side that, like, I mean, really she doesn't need to have, she doesn't owe him anything, but you know, she still can see at least to some degree things from his point of view, or try to, you know, try to understand his thinking behind it. But yeah, I thought that was a really interesting quote of hers, actually.
Yeah. I find it like, so, like, it's almost like a level of she's at peace with what happened to her, that she's able to see from his side of things almost, which fair play to her, because
like I said, she owes him nothing. There's no need to be that understanding or that forgiving, or like, she doesn't need to try and understand him, really, because I mean, what he did was horrific and horrendous, and like nothing justifies it. But yeah, there was, I remember when she said that, I was like, that's, you know, it's an interesting, I suppose she's had plenty of time to think about it as well. She's had her whole life to think about it. She's a grown-ass woman now. But it's then from there, what I thought was, you know, really interesting is, like, straight away nearly, Gil is like, there's a connection between these murders and these molestations. He's very insightful, isn't he? He's, you know, he's got a good eye for lack of a better word. He's got a good eye for these things, doesn't he?
Yeah. You don't, like, fair play to him for copping that on, because, like, you could understand why it would take police so long to realize that they were connected. Because, like, really and truly, what is there to connect them?
And he says at this point as well, like, that there's this meeting, and that he goes to this meeting, you know, with his fellow police officers, and like, he's laughed out of the fucking building. Like, they just absolutely make shite of him. They're like, are you stupid? Like, that's not the modus operandi of any a serial killer does things serially, the same thing over and over again. They don't shift from crime to crime. They don't shift from, you know, the type of person they commit the crime against. Like, that's just hasn't been seen ever in the history of the world. You're an idiot. And they laugh him out the building. And then there was this incident, like, within, I think it was like 10 days, that there was 5 murders. There was like a spate of them. So there was like Patty Higgins, and then do you remember her throat was cut and she was stabbed, and then there was, like, just a few miles away, like 4 days later or something, there was Mary Cannon, and then like 3 days later, a few miles away, then there was Whitney Bennett, and she was the 16-year-old that was bet with the tire iron. Do you remember that one?
Her attack was super brutal. She needed like near 500 stitches.
It was unbelievable, wasn't it? And they actually, again, when I was doing my research, they got a fair bit of pushback, or, you know, there was a fair bit of kind of discord amongst the viewing public at the inclusion of the crime scene photos of Whitney Bennett's crime scene photos. So again, for anyone listening that hasn't watched this, she was 16 years old. She was beaten with a tire iron. And in the documentary, it shows actual crime scene footage, and it shows like her bloodied duvet on her bed, like, and there's a lot of blood. It doesn't show her. But again, if there's something to be, you know, good to be taken from this particular attack, it is that, again, there is the shoe print that's left in blood. And it's at this point then that, like, Frank concedes with Gil, and he's like, you're right. It's one man. Like, it's definitely one man.
Absolutely.
And I think maybe the Whitney Bennett, the fact that she was kind of a middle ground, and I hate to say that, but wasn't she? She was a child, but slightly older, but she was attacked in a similar way that the older victims had been attacked. So she was like the missing piece nearly, wasn't she?
She was the one that kind of linked them all together. Like, before her, I could almost understand why the police weren't linking these molestations to these murders, because, like, really and truly, what was there to connect them?
Yeah.
But then you have her, she's the youngest that he's actually attacked in such a similar way to the murders. But then she's also a child and is attacked in the same way that the children were attacked.
In her bed.
In her bed, yeah, in her bed. Whilst her parents were asleep next door.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
It really is.
It's really scary. And like, again, another thing this documentary came under fire for and with was kind of how brutal it is, how, you know, it like I said, it shows pictures of crime scenes, it does reenactments, it does kind of
everything.
I don't know if they're reenactments actually, or whether they are kind of 3D animations, but there's these shots that are used that are kind of interdispersed throughout them. And like, personally, I love them. I thought were really effective, but I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. They're kind of nearly, it looks like the camera is nearly floating over the crime scene. Do you know what I'm on about?
Yes.
Those shots. I'm not sure. They're nearly too realistic looking. I'm not sure if they are staged things that are shot with a camera or whether they're actually a graphic. They're nearly hyper realized. I thought, aren't they? They're nearly like a computer game. They're so realistic looking. So I'm not sure if they were actually shot on a soundstage with, like, you know, people, or whether they were graphics that were developed. But I just thought they were so effective because it literally felt like you were floating above the crime scene.
Yeah. It's good. Like, it's a fresh perspective, because I feel like when crime scene photos, and I know, like, for for the likes of us, that, you know, this is what we do, like, we record podcasts on true crime. When you see the crime scene photos, like, it really brings you into it. But for like a viewer who just, you know, enjoys watching true crime documentary, like, you know, just on a,
who is used to just to dramatization
when you
or
see,
reenactment.
Yeah, when you see crime scene photos, it can be like, oh my God, why is this like on my screen?
It's shocking, yeah. It is shocking, but it does bring you to that place of, well, this is real. Like, you're not just watching a documentary on some randomer that happened and it feels far away. It brings you there, and it brings that emotion up. Is that like, holy shit,
like, this actually happened to somebody.
Yeah.
I think as well, sometimes with true crime documentaries, there's often this thing of like, oh, it's sensationalizing it, or it's glorifying it, or it's X, Y, and Z. And it's probably one of the only genres that gets that kind of shtick. And I don't really know why. I don't really know how you could say it's glorifying it or glamorizing it. Like you said, it is real life. It's giving you the facts, you know, all bells and whistles. Like, it's really, they owe us nothing. They don't owe us a sanitized version of it.
No.
And this is like a victim story. And I totally get what critics of, you know, this type of documentary, I get where they're coming from, and they're trying to take a higher moral stance or whatever. But I mean, if that was the shared view of the victims and their families, I don't think they would have participated in this documentary. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, if the families didn't want that in the documentary, I feel like they wouldn't have answered interview questions.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have shown it. Like, the respect that they seem to show for the victims and their families in those interviews, like, I don't think they're going to kind of turn that so that they can just show these photos if they want to show these photos. Like, I feel like they really had a respect for them and almost a relationship with them to kind of build up this trust and get them on the documentary.
Like, I feel like it was just to, like, really show you how horrible of a human being he was. Like, this is what he done
Yeah, it's the reality of it. And like you said, it's not like a sanitized one. It's not watered down. This is what it was. Like you can watch movies, you can watch other documentaries, you can listen to a podcast, but this is the nitty gritty of it.
And from there, then it moves on to the case of Mabel Bell and Florence Lang. And it doesn't, like, as much as we're talking about the shtick that this has got about, you know, the, you know, kind of razzle dazzle reenactments and that, I thought anyway that it doesn't actually harp on about the particulars of the crime. It states the facts and kind of moves on, and it might do a nice stylized shot or two or reenactment, like stylized reenactment of the actual crime scene. And then it moves on. Like it really only, in my opinion anyway, it really only uses the crimes as markers in the narrative to move the narrative along. Like, you know, we got to this case or we got to this crime, they were killed, this happened. But what we found was this. It's all about what they're finding and how they're piecing the case together. At least that was what I took away from it.
Well, this is it. Like when I was watching it, from having researched it and then telling the story, I was watching it and I was like, oh, they haven't mentioned this. They haven't mentioned that. Like with the Cesaros, they didn't mention that the wife actually tried to shoot Richard Ramirez with a shotgun, but there was no bullets in it. She was unsuccessful, and so he grossly gouged out her eyes in a fit of rage.
Yeah, it says like that he does take her eyes,
but it doesn't like fully explain why he was actually so aggressive towards her attack and murder, and it's because she tried to shoot him.
Imagine that terrifying moment as well when you realize there's no bullets in the gun. Oh my God.
That click. I can't yet.
No. Oh, it's like every scary film you've ever seen, isn't it? When you actually, instead of running from the killer, you try and turn on them or you try and defend yourself. And like, it's just, oh my God. It's just, it doesn't even like beg belief. Like, oh my God, it's just horrific to even think of it.
Yeah,
that's what I thought. Absolutely, though. I agree with you 100%. I thought they didn't go into very much detail. And if you're that kind of, you know, true crime fan or armchair sleuth, you're probably not going to like this documentary because it doesn't give a lot of gory deets. And that's fine with me. I'm not particularly into that. I always say it's the psychology with me. It's the psychology. And whether that be of the killer or of the victims, or in this case, you know, we get more of a look into probably the psychology of the guys running the case, Gil and Frank, and how that's, you know, particularly Gil, how it's affecting his family and how it's affecting him and, you know, everything. It's that for me with true crime. And of course it's the trying to understand what I could never do myself either. You know, it's again part of the psychology, but yeah, you're probably not going to like it if you like all the bells and whistles, gory details, you know.
Well, I did enjoy
it doesn't give that.
I did enjoy it, but I think just from the fact that I had prior knowledge, I was like sitting, like per Cottle, like was watching it with me, and I was like, they didn't mention this, and Cottle was like, please. I was like, but they didn't mention this either.
Yeah.
But
and then we move on to, like I was saying, that the case of Mabel Bell and Florence Lang, they were the two sisters in their 80s.
Yeah.
And this was the first, and again, the case is only that they don't go into a whole lot of gory details. They just say, like, you know, Mabel was assaulted, beaten, later died. Florence survived. She was her invalid sister. But this was the case where they saw the pentagram on the wall and also on the victim's leg that was done in lipstick. And again, this little tidbit, this little bit of evidence, this then is able to link them to a kind of cold case they had, or you couldn't even call it a cold case, an attempted kidnapping that had taken place.
Yeah.
Remember this, where the suspect had then driven away in this Toyota, I think it was. And then as he was fleeing the scene, a cop car pulled him over for a traffic violation. And he took off running. And after he legged it, they realized he was after, you know, as they had him on the bonnet or the boot of the car, wherever it was, he had drawn a pentagram in the dirt on the car.
So in the documentary, I actually had an issue with this because they made it seem like he just slipped through the detective's fingers. But what actually happened is that the detective pulled him over and kind of noticed, he pulled him over because he was speeding, and he also noticed that the car was actually similar to the description that was coming through the radio of this attempted kidnapping. And he asked him, "You're hardly this murderer we're looking for."
Jesus Christ.
And Richard Ramirez responded with, "No, when are you going to catch that guy?" And then the detective was like, "Ha ha ha, like, we're trying," had a laugh with him, and turned his back to call in the plate numbers to see if the car was stolen. And so while he's not at all paying attention to this perk that he's pulled over, this is when Richard draws his pentagram on the bonnet of the car and runs away. And so, like, I was watching the documentary and I was like, no, you're making it out like this was like, you know, it was just unfortunate, but really and truly he was the great iconic LAPD being moronic. Like,
you're failing to accurately convey how stupid you guys actually were. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, yeah. But, and I mean, they'll do that. Like, and I always say this, documentaries as well, I mean, are not unbiased. They are, I mean, not that there could be another side to the Richard Ramirez story. It's not like they, you know, he was actually a really nice guy. They're just, you know, painting him to be this monster. Like, he was a monster, obviously. But like with documentaries, they've got an agenda and they're selling that agenda. And they've decided what their storyline is going to be, and they're going to make all the dots fit to do that. And so as much as the documentary is educational, you have to kind of accept it on some level, definitely nowadays, as well as entertainment, you know.
Yeah, like
more than anything. Unless it's David Attenborough, it's going to be fairly, you know, it's you're going to have to take everything with a little pinch of salt. And so, yeah, like that would have ruined the narrative of these two hardworking cops and all the hard work. And like you said, you know, that there was actually just fucking idiots in the force as well. Imagine that as well. Isn't that so embarrassing? Imagine going like, you're hardly him, are you? Like, yeah, I am, yeah.
I feel like that is something that the guards...
Oh, you got me, damn it.
Like, he's hardly going to turn around and how did you know?
He straps off in a huff. I'm not playing anymore. You're not meant to catch me. Yeah, like it's very interesting that they completely kept that out of it as well. And then, I mean, there are elements where they do.
You coming to bed, hon?
Yep, honey, I'll be right there. Just got to turn out the light. Ow! 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 Ah! Gah!
Some things never change. Like your kids always leaving tiny toys on the floor for you to step on. And Geico saving folks lots of money on their car insurance.
Sweetie, I think I left the downstairs light on.
Please don't make me go.
15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
If you love to be remembered as the person who gives the best birthday gifts, I'm here to tell you that 1-800-Flowers.com is your ultimate birthday gifting destination. 1-800-Flowers has thoughtful and artfully created options that are guaranteed to deliver the best birthday surprise. Shop thousands of unique gifts at 1-800-Flowers.com for exclusive offers and great values. To order today, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in.
I'm going to say let on how stupid they are. That's not the kindest way of putting it. But you know what I mean? There's the bit then with, obviously, so, you know, they then have that car that's impounded. And then even though they sent it off to be fucking fingerprinted, it never is for whatever reason. And then they go back to get access to the car and find the fucking card for the dentist in Chinatown.
The dentist.
And he had
started.
This was on, I think this was on like the 8th or 9th of July. And he'd had an appointment on the 3rd. And they were like, you fucking idiots. If you'd done the car like we'd asked you to, you would have found the card, realized that he had a fucking appointment, and we could have been there waiting on him. So because they, in lieu of that then, in lieu of the fact that they couldn't do that, they then get this card for the dentist in Chinatown, go to this dentist. He pulls the records and he goes, do you know what? He's going to be back anyway. He's got a bad tooth. Yeah. And so they set a couple of officers sitting in the dentist's office waiting for him. And then, oh my God. And then they're doing this for a couple of days or a week or maybe more. It doesn't really say, it doesn't give exact timeline. I think it's about a week. And then they decide that this is a waste of time, money, and effort. And they pull the officers out and put in an alarm instead. And then the very next fucking day, the dentist rings and goes, why didn't you come? I was pressing on the alarm. Richard came back. And sure, here, the officers obviously had been pulled out and the alarm hadn't been wired in properly. And Richard had come back and they'd missed him again.
Imagine being that dentist where you're like looking after your fella's nasty teeth and you're pushing on that alarm, pushing. You're just waiting for the cops to come and they never I would shit myself if I was the dentist.
I'd say he had poked and prodded Richard so many times, just out of fear, shaking the hand, shaking, being like, "Okay, I'm gonna look at your teeth now."
Yeah. I wonder though, did they tell him, or did they just say that he was implemented in a case, or would you give out that information to somebody?
No, but if I was a dentist,
when you're not really sure, and
if I was a dentist and one of my clients warranted police officers and an alarm.
Yeah, you'd put
an armed guard.
Exactly.
But if I was Gil and Frank, I would have actually bet the crap out of whoever was supposed to install that alarm. I would have been like, which moron is to blame? Like, who done it?
It's a reoccurring thread in true crime documentaries as well. Like, the path to getting your man is never clean cut. And the amount of human error is just, do you know what I mean? Like, it's, and that's, the case with life, unfortunately. We are humans and human error always has to be allowed for. But Jesus, the amount of near misses, like, even like, with the Yorkshire Ripper, like, he was like what you were saying with Richard Ramirez, he was literally pulled over as well. And he was like, no, it's not, I'm not him. Like, he was brought in 6 times and questioned. In relation to the fucking Yorkshire Ripper. I'm like, no, definitely not me. 6 times and let go,
There was one detective as well who was like, I feel like it's this guy. And everybody was like,
nah.
No, that's not who we're looking for. And then he was like, was told to just shut up about it.
Yeah.
And he did. And then when they arrested him, he was like, I fucking knew it.
Yeah. Just to clarify now for anyone listening, we're talking about the Yorkshire Ripper, not Richard Ramirez, but we're just saying the similarities in these cases where you always have to allow for human error, don't you?
There's always one.
There's always.
There was a few.
There was a few.
Always, fuck. Some mothers do have them. But yeah, then after that, and there's kind of a bit of a jump, and there's this murder that takes place in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I mean, if this had happened nowadays, the detectives will be rubbing their hands in glee because the dirty fecker, he vomited on the floor.
I know.
And masturbated onto the carpet. Like, he literally left DNA all over the shop.
Everywhere.
When I heard that, I literally gagged. Like, I was gagging at my television. I couldn't.
He was a nasty little...
But he's just trying to be vulgar. He's just trying to get a reaction here, isn't it? It's really kind of childish in a way. It's like something a kid would do. Trying to get a reaction.
But that's what he was all about. Like, when he done interviews, he literally talked about, like, the whole reason he left people alive was just because he felt like it. And, like, the things that he done, like, he just wanted to piss people off. And it was like, what is actually wrong with you? Like, really? Like, that's what you're trying to do? You're just trying to be annoying?
That's what he gets his kicks out of. And that murder in San Francisco as well, there was this satanic symbol left on the wall. And again, it's Gail, or at least for the purposes of this documentary, it's Gail who's like says it's the same guy. It's, he's 500 miles away from us doing the same thing. And
as well as
on a plane and get down there, and the press get wind of it as well.
Oh.
And do you remember this with the fucking mayor? So they're down in San Francisco and they set up this task force and they brief them on everything and they tell the mayor and the mayor is going to do this press conference and she just lets everything slip to the public, doesn't she?
She let it all hang out.
So this is literally the one thing that I probably learned from the doc, like, you know, I'm sure there's a few things, but this is probably the main thing. So in my research, I actually thought it was the San Francisco Police Department that let it out to that held the press conference. I didn't actually know it was the mayor. And why would you do it? Why? But
in her defense as well, I think it could be Gail, it could be Frank, somebody in the documentary, I do remember hearing this as well, says that it was the police told her and never told her that was
sensitive.
That stays between us. That's not to be said in the press conference. So in her defense, it's not like she just completely disobeyed an order. She wasn't told that was confidential.
No, but I just was had to mention the shoe. You fucking had to.
Yeah, and he's so pissed off, isn't he? Even talking about it.
You can see him
so fucked off.
He's
the memory of it, even all these years later, he's like, oh my God, we were so pissed off. We were just we had so little to go on, but now we had nothing. I
can completely understand it.
And the shoe was never found, never recovered.
He threw it over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
The wanker that he is.
The wanker that he is. I love it.
He just was he has figured out my shoe. Gone.
And then there's it kind of then when the documentary gets to the end or gets, as often is the case I find with Netflix, it all kind of happens really quickly. So the first 3 episodes are all about the case, them working the case, the precision of knitting all the little bits together to, what does this point to? It doesn't really point to anyone. Trying to get little bits of evidence here, there, and everywhere. And then, well, again, for the purpose of the documentary, it seems like everything comes together at once because there's, first of all, they get a fingerprint off the rear view mirror of this stolen car that's ID'd after one of the assaults or one of the attacks. And then they get a tip from somebody that says, oh, my dad befriended this guy on Skid Row called Rick, and he was singing from the fucking treetops about this murder he did with a 22 caliber. And obviously they now know that it's a 22 caliber gun because fucking San Francisco mayor, I can't remember her name, eludes me at the moment, but she has let that slip. So they know it's 22 caliber gun. And then he sold the gun and this radio, and that radio then is traced to one of the murders, the Lang murder, via receipt. Then they have a police informant that got a brace from this friend who's also called Rick and who wears an AC/DC hat. They know he has an AC/DC hat, has bad breath. They know he has bad breath. What's his full name? His full name is Richard Ramirez. And that's the first time they get a name, really.
Get a name.
And I honestly, as much as I don't like police brutality, I think that detective in San Francisco did what he needed to do to get that name off of that man that had fought.
That's a great story. Actually, do you know what? I'd completely forgotten about that. You talk us through that little story about how he gets that info out.
Isn't it Detective Falzone is his name? So he grabs this guy that has given this bracelet to his wife. Anyway, he gets this bracelet off of Richard Ramirez. And he's just telling his wife, oh, I got it off my friend Rick. And so the detective decides, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to this guy because the bracelet actually relates to one of the murders and one of the victims. So he goes and finds him, and your man is like, I'm not going to talk to you. No fucking way am I telling you this lad's name. And the detective kind of looked back at him and had a thought. And he was like, I just thought about all the victims, all their families, the scenes, the crimes that I've witnessed.
Yeah.
And he put his arm back. He put his fist back to really just beat the shit out of him. And your man completely pussied out and was like, it's Richard Ramirez. It's Richard Ramirez. No. So I don't think that Detective Falzone, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, I don't think he gets enough credit.
No.
He's a very small part in it, isn't he? He's only kind of brought in for that piece.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, you could tell as well that he's got an interesting story to tell. You can tell that there's probably a little bit of, maybe not now, but at the time, animosity between, you know, the San Francisco police and the LA police at the time, because obviously there was this back and forth about like releasing the information to the media, and I think San Fran were in favor of it, in LA obviously because they've been working this case for so long, we're like, don't release anything, and obviously everything was released in the end anyway. But he's a great little character in it, a minor character, but he's very likable as well, isn't he?
Yes, he kind of reminds me of an armadillo, just in physical features. I don't know why, but I find him very cute. And I would have liked to have heard more from him. I would have liked him to be probably a bigger character, because I feel like that was crucial. That was a really crucial step in obviously figuring out who Richard was and getting that name. I definitely would have liked to hear more from him, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then from that point, like, we have the name, you think that's kind of it. And that's at the end of the third episode. So it's, you know, the start of the 4th episode, then literally, like I said in my notes, the briefest mention of a killer I've ever seen in any.
Oh my God, I couldn't.
They literally utter at the start of episode 4, they utter about 5 lines. He was the kid who never fit in. His cousin killed his wife in front of him. His father tied him to a cross in the cemetery, and he got into heroin and cocaine. And that's it. Like, that's where, that's as much as you hear about him in it, isn't it? Really, like, that's the whole synopsis of him.
That's pretty much.
They and then they moved from that really quickly onto the fact that,
so
like,
much worse happened to him.
Yeah.
Like, his mother worked in a chemical plant while she was pregnant with him. He hit his head twice and he had to get stitches several times. And then his sister's husband used to bring him out to go peep in women's windows.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that, actually.
Yeah, like, that is weird. Like, that's so weird. And he introduced Richard into, like, LSD and heroin, and Richard is at this time 12 and 13.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
super impressionable.
Super impressionable.
Yeah, as he would be at that age.
I'm not excusing what he done.
But I know where you're coming from, though. It definitely, and like we've said it several times already, it skimps on the details in this. This isn't a documentary to watch if you want the nitty gritty, gory details of either the murderer and his backstory, or B, the victims and their, you know, it focuses much more on the case itself and how the clues were knitted together. It's like a game of Cluedo, really, isn't it? This documentary.
But I think it fits in a sense that we, like you said at the beginning, Gemma, we've already heard so much about Richard Ramirez. He's a household name at this point. Like, everybody knows about him, I think, I would imagine. So I think it's not the type of documentary, if you're actually looking to learn more about Richard himself, it's not what you would be looking for.
No. And I don't even know necessarily if it would be something that you'd be watching to learn more about the crimes, because they kind of tell you, like, he killed this person, then this person, then this person. It doesn't go into major detail.
No.
I do say, though, episode 4 was my favorite, just based off how he's caught.
It's I would agree. It's probably my favorite as well, with the exception, like I said, in, I think it was at the end of episode 1 or the start of episode 2, with the interview with his 6-year-old victim Anastasia. But this is a cracking episode because everything happens then so quickly. So they talk you through then how, okay, they have his name obviously at the end of episode 3. There's 8 Richard Ramirez's, or Zai, or whatever, plural of Ramirez's, and they have to figure out then which one it is. So basically they have this print, as we said already, which was off the rear view mirror of this car, and then they match that up against all 8. They have a positive. They actually had him arrested a couple of months previously, and they have the mugshot. I think they said like 8 months, so this would have been in the middle of it all, like.
Yeah, he
and
was a handful of times.
Yeah. And then they're kind of arguing about whether to go public with it or whether to sit on it. And obviously they do go public with it. His face is on the front of every feckin' newspaper. He's in Arizona, I think, visiting his...
Yeah, he goes down to visit his brother and then
visiting his brother. I feel like it was Arizona. And then so they know to stake out this Greyhound bus station because A, he's got a locker there, and B, that's how he gets around. So they stake this out. He comes back from Arizona. He spots the police instantly because even though they're dressed like homeless people, they say, they're not smelly and their hair is clean and their nails are clean. And, even though they're dressed like homeless people, it's quite obvious that they're not. And he instantly gets this. So he gets out of the bus station. He goes to a liquor store and sees himself. What I loved about this, right, is as they're talking you through the narrative. So as Gil is going, he went into a liquor store and saw himself on a paper. It then shows the actual footage of the interview of the guy who worked in the liquor store going, yeah, I could see him looking at me and looking at the paper. And then, his eyes got wide and he ran out. I like the way they interject the storytelling with actual footage here. It's very effective, I thought. And then he hops onto a bus and he sees somebody on the bus looking at the paper and looking at him, and they pull the cord, and then he hops off and they hop off after him, and they ring the cops and they flag down a truck driver and they tell the truck driver to follow him. This is the Night Stalker. The truck drivers are following this guy and he's on foot at this stage running through the fucking streets. And then he comes into this neighborhood and tries to carjack a car. And when that doesn't work, he runs across the street and the whole fucking neighborhood comes out.
Love it.
It's great.
It's brilliant.
It's amazing.
And then as they're telling you this, you have, again, the actual footage from the news shows of the time interviewing the people going, oh yeah, we got him now. I started hitting him with a bar. I
just
can't. Basically this angry mob lynches him.
It's amazing. It's fair play to these people.
I loved that your man was battering Richard with the metal rod while also calling out for his wife to get his gun. I was like, yes.
We all feel that rage.
And it feels like kind of a full circle moment as well, doesn't it? Because like we've said, and we've said over and over again throughout this episode, it's not Richard Ramirez's story. It's the story of the people it affected, the city it affected, the police officers worked the case, the victims and their families. And so it's this lovely full circle moment when the people that he has been terrifying for months, this city is basically on tenterhooks. People are afraid to fucking piss for fear of this guy coming in the middle of the night. And they're the guys who get him, not the police, not the detectives. It's the people he's been terrorizing that get him in the end.
But one thing as well, if I was Gil or Frank, I would have been absolutely raging that it wasn't one of us that had gotten to arrest him in the end. It was some rookie on the beat cop.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah, I felt the same actually.
You'd be like, no, you fucking didn't. What the fuck are you on about?
It would have tied everything up in a nice little bow, wouldn't it? And I felt the same though with the detective in San Francisco as well, that actually eventually got his name. I was like, for fuck's sake, and the poor guy's working on for ages and you're the one who gets the name. And
you do, in that sense, literally, Frank and Gil's life is so affected. More so Gil's, but from just trying to catch this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's San Francisco that get the name. And then it's this off the beat cop that calls it in and is like, I have Richard Ramirez in my car.
And he looks about 12, doesn't he? I'd say he's fresh off
first day on the job, and he's like, I got Richard Ramirez.
He's got tissue on his face where he's cut himself shaving. He's so fresh around the gills. I'd say they were fucking raging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, though it is it's justice, isn't it? That this city has been so terrorized by this Night Stalker that they literally, when they have him, they've just had enough. And actually, when he's in the liquor store, two elderly women, they don't mention this in the documentary, but two elderly women also notice him and they start screaming El Matador, which is like the murderer.
That's crazy.
El Matador, I think it is. Yeah.
Is it Matador the guy with the bull?
Oh, maybe. I forget what.
You know the guy with the red blanket and the bulls?
Yeah.
Is that a Matador?
That's a Matador as well. I wonder, do you know that it might be spelled different, or maybe not. Maybe that means maybe they call them murder as well. I don't know.
That's just what I think of when it comes to Matador.
Maybe I said it wrong. Maybe that's not what they say. I don't speak Spanish.
That's not good enough. You have to be fluent in Spanish to be on this podcast. Get out.
Anyway, they start screaming like in Spanish, like the murderer, and like pointing at him. And he's like, shit, like I am fucked. Like, why is my face everywhere?
It's brilliant though, isn't it? It's like the ultimate. It's the ultimate. You know, you couldn't hope for a better end.
No, you really couldn't.
Yeah,
and like,
to a story or to a case. Like it's again, it's like something you'd see in a film, and you'd be like, that's too far fetched. That wouldn't happen in real life. It's great. It's a great build up and then a great climax to like the end of this, the end of his reign of terror over this city. And what I loved as well about this episode was the footage then when he's in the police station and this crowd of hundreds gather outside. It's like fucking gay pride or something, isn't it? They're on the roofs of cars. They're like, it's insane. It's like the president has come to town.
You'd swear like Beyonce was in having a chat.
Like and they're chanting and dancing and like they're literally like dancing in the streets. They're so delighted this fucker has been caught. Like
you can really feel like the sense of like relief that they all had.
Yeah.
Like the deep breath that they all took. Like, oh, I can breathe again.
But is this not the same time that some woman just gets her boobies out then for Richard? Like, Richard, I love you. And Gail's like, that's not for me.
I didn't know how to take that. I didn't know whether to take that as a Richard, I love you, or fuck you, this is someone you won't rape and kill. I don't know what she meant by it. Was she a feminist, or was she like, was this his first groupie? It's hard to know. They don't really clarify. I suppose they don't know.
Clarify, but I do feel like she was like a you're sexy. Like, I love you.
And they do like they go into that as well, although very briefly, because like I said, they don't harp on about him too much, but they do go into that. What do they call it? The bad boy syndrome. That's what they call it in the documentary. It's that bad boy syndrome, where he has these groupies. So like throughout the trial, and then before I get ahead of myself, I just thought as well it was kind of very fitting that it was his 6-year-old victim, Anastasia, that ID'd him, that pulled him out of the
that was brilliant.
Yeah. So look, Gil and Frank didn't get their moment in the sun. They didn't get the name. They didn't get to arrest him. But I thought it was very poetic that it was Anastasia then that actually pulled him out of the photo fit. But then like you were saying with the groupies, and it shows some of the pictures, which I've never seen before. I've never looked for it. I've never looked for that information, so I've never seen it.
No, me neither.
Photos that he receives.
They are photos that I wouldn't even send to Call. They're like, here, just have a photo of my tits.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure one of them had a bad boob job done. She looks like she had a big scar just going all the way across under her boobs. I was like, I wouldn't be showing that off now. But I couldn't believe that there was just nudies on my screen.
And couldn't believe that people, but I mean, we know this. We know from working in this industry that they do have groupies, and it's, again, I suppose, like I said, it goes back to the psychology of it. It's interesting because we don't get it. It's not something.
If you love to be remembered as the person who gives the best birthday gifts, I'm here to tell you that 1-800-Flowers.com is your ultimate birthday gifting destination. 1-800-Flowers has thoughtful and artfully created options that are guaranteed to deliver the best birthday surprise. Shop thousands of unique gifts at 1-800-Flowers.com for exclusive offers and great values. To order today, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in.
The moment you realized you were mistaking your kids for coworkers.
Okay, team, I'm taking my 15 now.
Taking 15 what?
Was the moment you knew it was time to get back to work. Let's job it up. At CareerBuilder, our simple, customizable search tool lets you search for part-time, full-time, and even work-from-home jobs, so you can find a job that fits your lifestyle. Get started now at CareerBuilder.com.
That we'd ever do. But I mean, you can't help but feel these are people that are deeply damaged in and of themselves, right?
They are people who really do have like some sort of like something mentally, like as in like, I don't know, someone scarred them years ago, daddy issues.
I can change him.
I can He wouldn't try murder me, okay? Like,
that girl, yes, that he wouldn't ever do it to me. And you're fucking wrong. Like, somebody made a comment in the documentary, like, he's not looking at you out of interest. He's looking at you like your dinner.
Yeah. That was a great quote, actually, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that was from that journalist Zoe. Her surname evades me, but yeah, I thought that was a great quote. He was looking, they were looking at him fully in love with him because of this bad boy syndrome, and he was looking at them like dinner.
She was probably the only journalist out of the whole thing that I could stand. Anytime any of the other of them came on the screen, I was like, just shut up. Like, don't talk about the shoes. The fact that they actually had to bargain with the news reporter not to do a segment on the shoes before anything was said about them. I just thought that it's so predatory.
Yeah.
I suppose, just for content.
Like you're actually hindering an investigation.
Absolutely. And you'd like to think we're moving into like a new age of media and all of that. But yeah, sometimes when you get a look back into the old, I mean, like, you like to think of yourself in a new age of media, but yeah, there's still the fucking, Caroline Flax and all going on. So you couldn't even say that there is still that to me, lack of empathy, I suppose, on the part of reporters and journalists and stuff. But there does seem to be slowly some kind of a shift towards a more empathetic way and a more kind of moral way of reporting on these things. But again, that's back in the 80s, and that's what they did. It's what they did, and it's what they got away with, and they have to now take part in documentaries and just look like shit human beings, really, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Deserved.
And you're kind of going to, like, you've no one but yourself to blame, like,
exactly.
and how they can impede a case, or how they can, just blow a whole case apart by just being pricks, really,
Yeah.
But then I thought this was nice part in the final, because it's quite a rapid wrapping up of the story, but there was just this nice slow down, because it's all very intense. It's all happening bam bam bam, all this information. He's caught, he's lynched, he's in the jail cell, he's got the groupies, da da da, and then it's like a lot of information. It's all happening very fast, and then they just slow it down and bring you back down to earth for a moment. And I love this method of storytelling, because it just kind of grounds you and gets you out of the circus of the case, and just reminds you again that these are real people with real lives being affected. And they talk about when they go to Anastasia's house.
Yes.
So again, this is a 6-year-old victim. I'm going to let you guys talk us through this, because I thought this was lovely, and it's a little teary, little emotional moment as well.
When they're listening to her just tell her story, like, I'm sure she's probably, I don't know if she's still 6 at the time, she's probably 7 by the time they go talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just listening to her story, and they just all get really emotional about it. Like, I mean, how could you not?
She had said, if I will testify in court, if it means that no other little girls have to. And she had said as well about Gil reminding her of her teddy bear. And this is where like my eyes were starting to tear up.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gil says that he has to get up and leave the room so he can go and have a bit of a cry. Then Frank follows him, and then I can't remember who it was after.
Yeah, a third detective then also has
was it the DA? The prosecutor. But that's when the prosecutor kind of says there and then in the house, maybe let's not go forward with the children's cases.
I'm sure some people were probably like, no, like he has to, like, justice for all. But I feel like it was the right move. not making these children have to get up on a stand and tell complete strangers what this man did to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you're 6 and you're 7. Like, do you really want to have to tell this story time and time again?
And he's already up for, what, 43 counts, and he's already getting the death penalty. So it's kind of
like, you know,
what's best for the children at that point.
Yeah, like, why make them do this when he's already going to the chair?
Absolutely. You can understand their thinking behind it. I think I, though, was just blown away by the thought that Annie, 6, or like you said, maybe she was 7 at that point, year old, saying, you know, I'll testify so he can't hurt anyone like he hurt me. Like, do you know what I mean? Just having the wherewithal to understand that, even, you know, to go, right, yeah, I'll do that for everyone else. To, like,
I feel like
Jesus, I don't know about you. I wasn't that selfless at 6 or 7. Like, it was all about me. Like,
yeah, I feel like it really shows like what effect it had on her. You know, like, it feel like it made her feel like she had to grow up because she had to talk about this really horrendous crime.
Yeah.
And like, obviously had to do grown-up things like go ID him, and, you know.
Like that contrast of her even mentioning that she remembers Gil because he's like her teddy bear, to then straight away moving on to, I'll testify in court. It was like, kind of throws you a wee bit, because you're like, this poor little girl, like, because she's still so innocent.
Yeah.
A little baby adult nearly, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I mean, like you said, we already know, because everybody knows this case, he was found guilty. On 43 counts. And there was 140 witnesses called. Like, I don't know about you, but when I saw that, I thought that was absolutely, I knew there was a lot, obviously, because there was a lot of cases, there was a lot of people, but 140 witnesses called.
Astronomical.
Isn't it?
That's incredible,
like. And then you have the victims, survivors and their families kind of talking about the process of the trial itself. And again, it doesn't harp on about this for very long. It's literally all of, is it even 5 minutes of the final episode? And they talk about how just, you know, they're in the courtroom, and that one of them says, you know, what you forget about a trial is a trial gives you way more detail than what you hear in the press. So whatever you think you know, you hear in, you know, Technicolor in a courtroom. That, you know, one of them saying how she's in there listening to the victim. I think it was her grandmother that was killed. And she says she just couldn't take the gory details of it. So she goes outside to get some air. And she said, like, you know, she couldn't take the details inside, but then she steps outside and, you know, she's surrounded by his fucking fans. She said, like, it just felt like there was evil all around.
She's sat beside somebody who is upset, isn't it? She sits beside them on a bench, and
they have the tattooed pentagram on their palm.
I think they're crying at first, and she just automatically assumes that it's like another victim or another victim's family member, and then she sees that it's actually a fan. It's like, why the fuck are you upset?
Like, why are you even here? Go home.
Like, you know, he did such, and the things he did to these people are horrific. Like, he had an anger inside of him that these poor unfortunate people, it was taken out on.
Yeah.
Do you know? And like, you're sitting there with a fucking pentagram on your hand being like, he's gonna go to prison.
Yeah.
Yes, he is. Like,
and he'll die there.
Speaking of which, it then explains how, you know, on I think it was like the 7th of November 1989, he's sentenced to death in the gas chamber. But look, as we know, that never comes to fruition. It goes to the Supreme Court for I think it's a thing in LA that once you're sentenced to death, it goes instantly to the Supreme Court then to be retried again. And he doesn't go to the gas chamber between the jigs and the reels, but then Frank and Gail are talking about how they go to his cell after that sentencing.
Yeah.
And he's like laughing and he's like, "Are you going to come to my execution, guys?" Like he
was a fan of Frank.
Yeah.
Like he was a fan.
Yeah, he'd been keeping up with Frank and Gail. He'd been, really reading about them. And
he was really super impressed about how Frank caught the Hillside Strangler.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was like, "Oh my God." Like,
and sure, doesn't he tell them that he tells them he's a student of the Hillside Stranglers and of Bundy as well, that he looked up their, methods, and he was big into their cases and they were nearly like inspiration for him.
I had to laugh as well when they found Jack the Knife writing on the wall in San Francisco. Somebody compared him to like a Charles Manson kind of wannabe.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have this thing. I don't understand why anybody would want to be a wannabe of Charles Manson. Like he was such a small fucking petty idiot of a man.
Mm-hmm.
Who got other people to do his dirty work. I just like comparing Richard to Manson was almost funny to me in a way that it's hard to explain. Like he is just a wannabe, almost. Like he is a coward, Richard, I mean.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
he's just picking and choosing these different things that he's picked up from other killers and deciding to use them in his own kind of work.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think he's just a really he's in stature and in mind a really weak person, so then gets this kind of strength from doing this to helpless people, because it wasn't there the case as well, we're jumping backwards now, but they talked about this couple and he shoots the two of them at point blank range and somehow they don't fucking die, and the husband chases him out with the house and he has the gun. Like the husband's unarmed and has a bullet in his head and chases him out. So like he's a real fucking coward.
How much of a coward he is. So when he was attacking people, he would make them swear to Satan. So say like he asked, I think, one woman like about jewelry, and she was like, "I swear to God, I don't have any." And he was like, "No, swear to Satan." But when the police officer arrived, when the neighborhood was attacking him, he reportedly, so the neighborhood is attacking him. This man is beating him with a fucking iron rod. The policeman comes along and stops them all, and he's like, "Thank God you're here."
The irony.
Like, oh really? Oh, how interesting.
The irony.
Thank God that like these people didn't kill you.
That's a really lovely segue to my next point, which is how this documentary ends up. So again, it ends as it begins. It's with Gil, and he's talking about his prayers every night. Do you remember this?
Oh, I was bawling, Gemma. I was bawling.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Like it was beautiful, but also really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you take it away. You talk us through it.
So Gil is talking about, like, obviously the sentencing. He's like, everything is over. At this stage, his wife has moved out with the children because they're just so scared for their own safety.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as Richard is sentenced, he's coming out and there's all these people around him and he's just looking for Pearl. He's just looking for his wife. Where's my wife? Where's my wife? And he says that night he goes home and he crawls into bed and he cries like a little baby. And he's just saying that he would have loved if his father was there to kind of see how far he'd progressed and that he'd gotten a conviction.
To make his dad proud.
Yeah. And then Pearl, the wife, comes in and says, "He's with you." And then, that was the end to me.
Sent me. Like, get me a box of tissues.
Yeah.
I'm away to bed to cry myself to sleep. Like, that's just too much for me.
Yeah. And then Gil was just saying that, like, he prays for people. He will say his prayer and just for different people, I guess, for the victims and their families, that kind of thing. Yeah. He's such a wholesome man.
Yeah. Did you think it was interesting that he says his prayer, he says his nightly prayer, and then he goes, and then when I'm done saying that prayer, I go through a list of people and I end with Richard Ramirez?
I feel like Richard Ramirez really affected him.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure, obviously, I'm not a police officer. I don't know, but I'm sure it can be very difficult. But the things that they had to see, the things that
Mhm.
he's done to these people, like that is something that will haunt you for the rest of your life.
And for somebody like Gil, who's very into his religion, like
Yeah.
as you said in the very beginning of this episode, Gemma, to him that was the exact work of evil, of
Yeah.
Satan, and it was almost like proof to him. So
I feel like Richard really affected him.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel
He's like praying for his soul almost, you know.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. That, I don't know about you, but even though I knew he had this strong faith, that, like, I remember when I heard that, I remember the first time I watched it, when I heard that and the credits came up, and I was there for a good 30 seconds afterwards with my jaw on the ground going, praise Richard Ramirez, you know, and just sitting with it and kind of going, do I like that ending?
But then
do I think that's the way that documentary should have ended? And then it's only, I suppose, upon reflect, because it's quite shocking, I think. It's quite shocking for any detective to say that they pray for the soul of a mass murderer and a guy who, like we've just spoke about for that second, 40 minutes or whatever, who's done everything that he's done. And Gil has witnessed all this firsthand. But then again, it's very fitting, I suppose, because it goes back to the type of man that not Richard Ramirez is, but the type of man that Gil is, that everyone's worth a prayer. Everyone's soul is worth saving.
I wonder though, like from the aspect of like, I'm an atheist as well. Like, do we not get it because we don't really believe in that? Like, we don't have spirituality that like we can pray for someone like Richard Ramirez.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he's obviously all about God and forgiving, and like everybody deserves a chance almost.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, like yes, he did these horrible crimes, but like, let's say a prayer for the fact that he deserves a chance. In a sense that like obviously, what he did was horrible, but like he still deserves a prayer.
Personally, I don't think that Gil, whether he knows it or not, I don't know that he's doing that for Richard. I think he's doing that for himself. What he's seen and what he did, it would weigh extremely heavily on anybody. So to say a prayer for somebody that you think is so evil and so wrong, like that kind of helps you deal with what you've seen and what you've dealt with. I would suppose, like I'm atheist as well. I don't really know what's going on, but like, I don't know. I suppose.
But like, were you as shocked by that ending as I was? Because I was literally, the first time I saw that, I was like, "You what?" Like, I was literally just here, jaw on the ground, kind of going, "Huh?" And I was a little bit initially, like I said, I was a little bit like, I don't know if I like that ending. I don't know if that's the best ending. But then the more I thought about it, I kind of thought it was a perfect ending.
I feel like it is a perfect ending in the sense that, like, because it's really showcasing who Gil is and who Frank was as well. Like, like it really showcased that, like, this is what they dealt with.
Yeah.
What they had to do.
And it's maybe what you have to do to work in that line of work as well. Maybe you have to be able to forgive. You have to be able to pray for evil. You have to be able to hope that souls can be saved if you believe in that kind of thing. Like, maybe that's the only thing that gets you through that kind of job.
Exactly.
And maybe as a documentary thing, obviously I don't know what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to like silence or anything like that. But the documentary, like we've said before, it was very like this, these are the facts of the case. This is what happened next. But it kind of just moved and snowballed and went faster and faster. But then, like you said, at the end, it really slowed down. And I think it just showed that little part of humanity that kind of reminds you that, like, okay, the world is good.
Yeah, like there is, the world isn't full of just monsters.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Maybe they did that to just show, exactly, like for every monster, every Richard Ramirez that's out there, there is a good man who will pray for his soul like Gil. There's, there is the absolute polar opposite of him. There's one to balance the other out, like.
Yeah.
But like I said, initially I found the ending quite jarring and I was like, don't like that. And then the more I thought about it, I was I could see the director's reasoning, or I could at least try to see his reasoning or understand the creative process behind it. But I did think it was definitely a lovely full circle moment, like with what I said, Anastasia IDing him, the victim IDing him. I also thought because it had started out with Gil talking about his religion and how it was so important to him, and then ending up with that. And, it's just that juxtaposition, isn't it, of good and evil.
Exactly.
Yeah. This one got I'm not surprised at all. I'm surprised, I suppose, because of some of the negative reviews that are out there for this, of which there are many. There's loads of good reviews as well, but there's a lot of negative reviews. But it got 8.1 on IMDb, which is, anybody who listens to this show will know, is fucking astronomical for a true crime documentary, because true crime documentaries are still seen as this kind of seedy, slimy subgenre of documentaries. Documentaries are educational. They're kind of the upper class, and then true crime is just known as working class cousin, third cousin you don't talk about. They're really, they're not thought of in high regard. So to get 8.1, it's unheard of. It's unheard of to get above a 7 for a true crime documentary. So I think that speaks volumes to, what the public's perception of this documentary is. They obviously liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Obviously, me and Megan covered the case on an episode before the documentary was released. So going and watching it after talking about it, obviously I had knowledge, and like I said earlier, I was like, oh, they're not mentioning this, or they haven't said this yet. I still really enjoyed it because it was such a fresh outlook on a documentary about such a horrific and prolific murderer.
Yeah.
It was so refreshing to actually just see what it was like from the detective side of things, and how much of a toll it takes on their lives
and their families.
Yeah,
I agree.
I feel like when you're watching a documentary, when you're watching a Ted Bundy documentary, you don't actually think about the effects that would have had on the detectives that were working on his case.
Yeah.
And even when I was talking about Richard Ramirez, I never once thought about the effects it had on Frank Salerno or anybody involved in trying to find him, because I think you're so engulfed in him and what he done.
Yeah.
But then when you actually do see that aspect of it, you're like, oh my God, you poor people, having to walk into that crime scene, and then Gil and his family, and how scared that his family was. Because I think, didn't one of the murders happen only a few
6-minute drive away from him?
Yeah. How scary must have that been? That was a very bad sentence. That was very poor English.
But no, it's true. Like you said, sometimes we get lost in the salacious kind of details of the murder or the crimes. And then, there seems to be this, there's been a couple of documentaries lately of note that I have seen this in, where the storytelling is totally switched around. What's coming straight to mind, because this documentary there was loads of aspects of it that reminded me of it, was Fear City. I don't know if you've seen it, but that's on Netflix as well. We covered it in season 2, but even in terms of the stylization of some of the shots, and particularly Frank Salerno's pieces to camera in that little cafe, and it's lit with the red light, and if it's not an Italian cafe, it looks like it. It's got the red check tablecloth and the little candle, and it's all very dimly lit. And that really reminded me of the interview scenes in Fear City as well. And Fear City then is it's a mafia story told by the from the perspective of law enforcement, the people who are trying to hunt down the mafia. So it's a nice twist on it. So it kind of reminded me of that. And like I said, I have noticed that maybe in the last 12 months that there does seem to be this kind of emerging type of documentary coming out where they're retelling a story. And it's very hard to tell a story differently that's been told umpteen fucking times. So like fair play to them for reimagining it or you know, putting a fresh perspective on it, because sometimes I feel like that's what's needed as well to hammer a message home, is to see how it affects people.
Yeah. And it is super easy to actually not realize how it affects people, because I feel like, I don't know if it's just an Irish thing or not, but it's like, you know, like, oh, that would never happen me. Like, or that would never happen to somebody I know.
Yeah, you get very removed from it.
Yeah. Like almost like it's a TV program. Do you know, like as in like something that you see on like SVU or like, you know, that then when you actually do see it from a fresh perspective, it's like, oh my God, like,
yeah,
how horrible.
That's funny. That actually reminds me of one of my favorite Irish sayings. It'll never happen to you until it does.
Exactly.
Yeah. Niamh, Megan, thanks for joining us on What's Up Dog podcast.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having us.
And just like that, it's time to say goodbye. Guys, as always, if you like what we do, if you like the cut of my jib, make sure to give us a rate, a review, and subscribe to us as well on Apple Podcasts. We'll catch you next time, guys. Good luck. Good night. God bless.
If you love to be remembered as the person who gives the best birthday gifts, I'm here to tell you that 1-800-Flowers.com is your ultimate birthday gifting destination. 1-800-Flowers has thoughtful and artfully created options that are guaranteed to deliver the best birthday surprise. Shop thousands of unique gifts at 1-800-Flowers.com for exclusive offers and great values. To order today, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/tune in. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/tune in.